Hello and welcome to my channel once again. Today I want to talk about something a little bit different from what I usually do here, which is reviewing books. But today I want to talk about two political philosophies that lie on the opposite ends of the spectrum and are yet very similar in the way that they come into power, and illustrate them with two examples that I came up with when I had too much time. So without further ado, let's begin. So as we begin, I want to give the disclaimer that these are just definitions of ideas and philosophies and not my personal opinion. And any examples that I give are purely to illustrate the point in question and not to preach any ideas. So with that out of the way, let's begin. Before we get into the actual ideas and the philosophies that I want to discuss, let's talk about the political spectrum. So what is the left-right spectrum that we keep hearing about? The leftist, the rightist, what exactly is it and how did it originate? So to give a bit of a background, during the French Revolution, the members of the National Assembly were asked to assemble either on the left or on the right of the president, based on whether they supported the king or the revolution. So members who supported the king assembled to the right of the president, and those who were in favor of the revolution gathered to his left. And that is how the term left and right and the spectrum kind of began its origin. So towards the left, we have ideals such as equality, liberty, fraternity, similar to the ideals of the revolution itself, and about social equality, fighting against concentration of money, abolishing the class distinctions, freedom of individual thought, freedom of ideas, diversity, pluralism, inclusivity, internationalism. So these are some of the ideas towards the left of the spectrum. Now, towards the right are principles such as traditionalism, authority, conservatism, submitting to a form of hierarchy, the necessity of hierarchy, the necessity of having a central and strong leadership. So, towards the right would be those who would call, I guess, those who would fall under the category of conservatives, and towards the left we have the liberals. Now, certain ideologies don't fit anywhere on the spectrum, such as democracy, which is the people's rule, the people say. So you could have it either way, like depending on the majority opinion. So but Republican ideals do fall kind of towards the right. So this is just the broad overview of the left and right political spectrum. Now I want to talk about what lies at the farther left and at the farther right. So the extremes of these ideals. So let's begin with the left. Let me start with an example. Imagine a large bakery with hundreds of workers who begin their day early in the morning making loaves of bread. Throughout the day, they work making loaves upon loaves of bread until late into the night. And at the end of the day, they get paid one loaf. So they make hundreds of loaves, working in harsh conditions in the hot oven at the end of the day to get paid one loaf, which is often not enough to feed their family and themselves. This continues for a long period of time, and the owners of the bakery who form a fraction of the percentage of the workers, sell all these loaves of bread for a good profit, and they get richer as time goes on. While they continue to grow richer, the quality of life of the workers remains the same. So one day, all the workers gather together and realize one important fact, that they far, far outnumber the owners. They're tired of being paid, underpaid, and overworked. They rise up in a revolution and capture the bakery. Now, after having captured the bakery, they come together and decide that the reason for their misery is because the power was concentrated in a few individuals while the majority of the population worked for them. This stark class divide was the reason for their poverty. So they decide to abolish this divide and to abolish ownership in the hands of individuals. They decide that the factory would be owned by all of them, the bakery would be owned by all of them, and all of them will work equally and be paid equally. They would there are laws that come into place against the long hours, the harsh conditions, and their wages get doubled. Now everyone gets paid 2 loaves of bread, and they only have to produce 10 loaves per day, unlike before where they work from morning to night. This seems great, and everything is fine for a while, and this continues for some time. Then slowly the people working in the ovens realize that they are working harder than, say, the people who are mixing the ingredients, and being paid 2 loaves does not seem fair to them. And also, among the bakers themselves, few of them are more talented than others. They come up with innovations, they come up with new recipes and ideas for making bread, and are much, much more productive than their counterparts. And yet, no matter how good they are, they cannot exceed the pay of the 2 loaves per day, because everybody is going to be paid equally. After the revolution, slowly their dissatisfaction grows and keeps growing, and they find that their opportunity for growth is severely limited in this environment. That's when they look at this other bakery across the street, where people get hired and paid according to their skills, and there is no universal labor law, or it is decided based on everyone's individual merits. So these people, the most talented among the workers, slowly start leaving the bakery and go over to the other bakery. Having lost its talent, the output of this bakery begins to falter, while people having the security of the 2 loaves per day do not feel the necessity to work harder or to come up with new innovations. And the other bakery across the street starts to prosper with all this new talent coming in. Over the course of time, this bakery cannot keep up with its competition and with the market, and slowly goes out of business. If this seems familiar, it is because it's a gross oversimplification of the idea that Karl Marx and Frederick Engels came up with in their iconic book, The Communist Manifesto, in 1848. Although the origin of the concept is very utopian, where everyone works according to their ability and get paid according to their needs, the execution wasn't so great, wasn't so perfect. It is because in the real world, over the course of time, the class distinction that this philosophy so hinges on started getting blurred. The extreme labor conditions, the inhumane conditions that prevailed in the Industrial Revolution, during the Industrial Revolution, started tapering off with labor laws coming into place. individuals started specializing. It was no longer about this small group of elites who were rich and the poor workers who were manual laborers. There were jobs that required skill, there were jobs that required specialization, and often these private enterprises were paying very well so that the workers or the employees themselves could profit considerably. And people wanted the freedom to build their own wealth rather than it being controlled or policed by the state. Today, there's just one nation that can be considered truly communist, and it is North Korea. And we all know how it turned out for them. So another reason that a purely communist system of government or purely socialist government fails is also because as the dissatisfaction of the people grows, so does the authority of the state, which eventually leads to being monitored by the secret police. Any dissent or disagreement or difference of opinion at all is perceived as treason, and the very uprising that led to a birth of a communist state to begin with also ends up becoming the reason for such a state to be dissolved. So either way, if this is what lies on the far left with nobody owning anything, then one is tempted to imagine that on the far right we have a system of government of a great nation ruled by a benevolent king. But interestingly, what lies on the far right is quite similar or was inspired from the socialist ideology, and that is what we're going to be talking about now with another example. So before I talk about the idea, I want to see if it can be recognized by this example. Imagine a big, beautiful house. It has a lovely garden in the front and a beautiful backyard in the back, surrounded by this lovely white fence. A lot of people live in the house and they love their house. Life is good. And one day, one of the members of the house, tells everybody else, "Look at how great the house is. Isn't this the best in the world? Look at the lovely gardens. Look at the beautiful white walls. Look at how it protects us from the elements. Should we all not be grateful? I love this house, and I know every one of you do so too. Isn't it our responsibility to protect this beautiful house that gives us shelter and protects us from the elements? It is our duty to be loyal to this lovely house." Initially, everyone's like, "Yeah, I kind of see your point. This is a beautiful house and I live here. I love this place. And I would be homeless if it were not for this beautiful big house. And he is right. I should do my part in protecting it." And they all agree. And eventually, he is well liked and well loved by the other members of the house. And that is when he says, "Okay, since we all agree that this house is the greatest in the world and we have to protect it, let's start a guardian committee for protecting the house. The responsibility of the committee is to make sure that this house is not under threat from anyone or anything, within or without." And he appoints himself as the head of the guardian committee and asks for volunteers. A few people start volunteering and they form a group to protect the house. Everything seems well, and initially things go even fine. They keep the house free from stray dogs, stray children, there's intruders, trespassers, and people are actually glad for having the guardian committee. And then one day, the guy who appointed himself as the head comes back to them and tells them, okay, so now we've decided that we're going to protect this house. Don't you all think that we should also be self-reliant? So, since we should stop relying on the neighborhood for our basic survival, such as the grocery store or such as the electricity board, why should we be dependent on somebody else for our own livelihoods? So, we should be cultivating vegetables from our own gardens. We should be able to provide for ourselves. We should be able to generate our own electricity so that we can still survive if, say, the grocery store closes or the electricity board shuts down for some reason, and that would make us completely independent and give us the ability to persist no matter what. So people are a little bit split on this, but then eventually they do agree that it is better to be self-reliant. It couldn't hurt to try, and a group of volunteers come forward for farming the garden. A group come forward for generating the electricity. They start a small hydroelectric station. They start something in the backyard, and initially this is used to supplement the groceries that they get from outside, and the electricity is not cut off entirely. But then the leader comes back and tells them that look at them, the people going to the grocery store, they are conspiring against us. They want to take over this house. They are culturally corrupt for collaborating with the other houses and going to the central public place to get their groceries. We should stop relying on them completely, and it is our moral responsibility to meet the demands of this house with the supply that we can generate, and going to the grocery is going to be a crime from now on. So this is met largely with mixed responses and a lot of doubt. But then he says, those of you who do not want to do this, do not love this house, you are not loyal to this house, you do not appreciate the house for the shelter that it provides you, for the protection from the elements that you so ungratefully obtain by staying here, and now you do not want to do your bit for the house. And slowly the guardian committee comes forward and shuts the dissenters in a room. They lock them up in a room, and slowly people start fearing to go to the grocery, and some of them actually genuinely believe that maybe he's right, maybe it's wrong to go to the grocery, maybe the neighbors are conspiring to take over the house, and they start completely isolating themselves, and the house slowly becomes cut off from the neighborhood. While this is going on, the supply or the vegetables from the garden are not enough to feed everybody. The small electricity plant that they have fails to generate the amount needed to keep the house lit throughout the day. So the place starts having blackouts. People start starving, while the leader demands that since he is the head of the house and is responsible for its protection, he must be well fed to protect, in order to be able to actually protect and serve the house. So he doesn't really lose too much. The best vegetables from the garden go to him, while the other members of the house, including those who cultivate them, are starving. Now, there are children born into the members of the house. The next generation comes into being. Now, these children do not know anything about the neighborhood. They've never been to the grocery store. Their only exposure to the outside world comes from the windows. And from the moment they are born, they are told by the leader and from the guardian council for the house that all the other houses in the neighborhood are culturally and morally bereft. he shows them pictures of the house from before his time, when it was lovely and when it had the sunshine and when everyone was happy, and tells them, look how great we were in the past. We were brilliant. This is how we were. And the people around us deprived us of this. They are the enemy. And if you follow them, if you start going outside, going to the grocery stores, or if you start interacting with them, you are also culturally and morally bereft. These children grow up believing this to be the truth, and they believe it more fervently, more militantly, because this is their own truth. Many of them grow up and join the Guardian Council with a fanatic loyalty to the leader and to the house. But there are some who have seen the outside world through the windows. They've seen the shopping carts. They don't think it is so bad. They see how other houses stay lit throughout the year while having power in the house is a luxury for them. And they start to question, is what he's telling me the real truth? One day, some of them escape. They do actually go outside. They meet these other people who are conspiring to take over the house, and they find that they are not as bad after all. They're just normal people, and they see that the grocery store is a necessary and functional part of society. They know now the lies they've been told. Many of them don't ever want to go back to the house, but there are some who want to go back and tell the others what they've found. But in the time they've been gone, the leader tells everybody else in the house that they are traitors. They've abandoned this house that has provided them shelter since the time they were born. They're traitors. They deserve to be punished, the highest punishment, because it is treason of the highest order. He riles the other members of the council, the militantly loyal generation that has joined the council, against the defectors. So when these two people who want to tell everyone what they found come back to the house, they are immediately captured, immediately slaughtered, immediately punished. And it all happens inside the house under the absolute control of the leader. So the house went from being a beautiful place for people to live in to a prison from which people have to escape, to an eventual madhouse. And if you recognize what I have just told, it is what is now universally condemned to even be mentioned decades after the two countries that implemented, after the two governments that actually implemented this was dissolved. It is universally considered to be one of the most evil and cruel forms of governance. What I've talked about is just a gross oversimplification of fascism. Yes. So if at the far left we have the concept that nobody owns anything, on the far right is the concept that the state owns its people. You can see how, for the lack of a better word, abnormal this is, because historically nations were formed to protect the people. Tribes came together to establish villages. Villages grew into countries. These groups were formed to protect the individual. The nations were not formed to be protected by the people. They were formed to protect the rights of the people. And this ideology, this maddening sense of loyalty, of not just loyalty, of alienation of everything else, is 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 used as a form of crowd control, of a form of or as a myth to bring a large population together. And I must say that this sense of ultranationalism, this propaganda, is used only to benefit a system of individuals to come to power, and in no way actually goes on to serve the people. But how does one recognize it? Um, so largely, when I say, and also when I say that it is similar to the left, what I mean is that if at the far left we have the ideology where a strong sense of class consciousness unites the majority of a group of individuals against a minority. In this case, the class consciousness, the heightened sense of class consciousness is replaced with this strong sense of national consciousness. And yeah, so that is what I found interesting, how various forms of crowd control are used to unify a group of individuals to the point where they forget or surrender their critical thinking skills to the group in question, and any dissent or any difference of opinion is perceived as a betrayal. So, but how does one recognize something like that? I think there are a few general overarching mechanisms to not just identify fascism but any form of crowd control, and I think they can be simplified into the following steps. One is, you are told your language, religion, class, caste, creed, color, or nation is special. It could be either one of these, but you are told that one of these things to which you belong is very, very special. 2. You who belong to this very, very special category, which could be a language, which could be a nation, which could be a caste, creed, color, race, whatever it is, are being oppressed by a minority group of individuals who have been trying to deprive you of the glory that your caste, creed, etc., your lineage, whatever, had in the past. So in the past you were amazingly great, and now that is being deprived by this small group of people. This could be a religious minority, a gender-based minority, a sexual minority, a racial minority, whatever it is. You are being oppressed because of this group of people who have deprived you of the purity of this, whatever, the caste, creed, any one of the whatever it is that you identify with. And the third point is, the only way for you to achieve this past glory is to have a homogeneous system of government with a leader or a representative belonging to your particular caste, creed, whatever it is, and to get rid of that particular minority. And the reason that this happens is, with homogeneity, it is easy to control. The more diverse a group is, the more difficult it becomes to have everyone believe you, to have uniform assent to what you're trying to say. So this is another form of crowd control that is very effective if the crowd in question is homogeneous. And for the fourth point is, everybody around you, especially government systems, bodies that are more inclusive, more liberal, more free, are morally corrupt. And the more you distance yourself from these corrupt individuals, the better it is for your caste, creed, lineage, either one of these ideas that they pick up. And 5, and the last, the protection of this said caste, creed, religion, whatever it is, 1, is an overriding principle. This principle overrides everything else, all other considerations, moral, whatever it is, moral, humane, individual, all concerns can be overridden for the protection of this particular ideology. So these are the things that I think are very effective forms of crowd control for any country, any systems of governments that wish to implement these tactics. In the case of communism, it was a class consciousness. In the case of fascism, it is a strong sense of national consciousness. And in case of government systems such as theocracies, it is a very strong sense of religious consciousness. In case of German fascism, it was a very strong sense of racial consciousness. So that is what it is, a very strong sense of consciousness relating to your identity, that becoming an overriding principle. Everyone around you is trying to deprive you of your past glory. Free societies and liberal societies are morally corrupt. Yeah, that summarizes ideologies for crowd control. So why do I want to make this huge video talking about 2 very extreme ideologies? Because I think it is the responsibility for every one of us to be politically literate if there is even a semblance of election or an electoral system in our countries. Why is it important? It is important because we have to be able to recognize and identify these tactics when leaders and parties use them on us, and recognize and flag them for what they are. Why should we flag them? Because the leaders we elect, the people we give power over, have power over our lives, our choices, and the quality of life that we can lead within the particular nation. It directly affects our wealth creation, our individual freedom, our freedom to on choosing who we love, everything. It's inherently and intimately tied to us and our lives as individuals. And so it's very important to be educated about these various things, especially I guess in developing nations, which are still not which are still quite conservative. But yeah, that is pretty much what I wanted to tell. And hopefully you've taken away something from this video. And I want to end it with this lovely quote from Nietzsche. Enjoy and subscribe for more.